And today, we're tackling one of the absolute most critical topics you're going to face as CMA candidates, comparing actual results to plan results. Look, I know that staring down a mountain of cost and variance measures can feel super overwhelming, but I promise you, we're going to break this down together step by step so it makes perfect sense. By the end of our time today, you aren't just going to be memorizing formulas, you're actually going to understand the story they tell. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our addenda for today. First, an introduction to variance analysis. Then we'll tackle static versus flexible budgets. After that, we hit the level 2 breakdown, followed by management by exception, and finally, we'll wrap up with your key exam takeaways. All right, section 1, introduction to variance analysis, the reality of business. You know, in management accounting, a budget isn't just some piece of paper you print out and shove in a drawer. It's our roadmap for the entire year. But let's be totally real for a second. Life happens, right? Market prices suddenly skyrocket, machines break down on the factory floor, or hey, sometimes customers end up buying way more than we thought they would. The reality is, business rarely goes exactly according to the initial plan. And when the dust settles at the end of the month, management needs an answer to one fundamental question. Why didn't actual results match the plan? Variance analysis is literally our ultimate tool to figure out that why. It's how we regain control. If you can master this concept, you've effectively conquered the very heart of performance management for your exam. Moving on to section 2, static versus flexible budgets, avoiding the common trap. Before we get completely lost in the weeds of the math, we really need to lay the foundation and avoid this massive pitfall I see students hit all the time. Imagine you have a static budget built for exactly 10,000 units of production. That's your original plan based on one single rigid level of output. Now imagine your actual results come in and boom, you produce 12,000 units. You absolutely cannot compare a budget made for 10,000 units to actual costs incurred for 12,000 units. Doing that is like comparing apples to giant expensive oranges. Of course, your total variable costs are going to be higher. You made 2,000 more units. So to fix this, we use our secret weapon, the flexible budget. It shows us what the budget would have been if we had perfectly predicted that actual volume of 12,000 units right from the start. So how does this build our analytical framework? Well, step 1, we look at the grand total, the static budget variance. But because of that whole apples to oranges problem we just talked about, we got to jump immediately to step 2. We break that static budget variance down into 2 separate pieces. The first is the sales volume variance, which just tells us the impact of selling a different number of units than planned. The second piece, and honestly the one we really care about today, is the flexible budget variance. By using a flexible budget, we completely strip away the distraction of volume changes. It's the true indicator that reveals our actual cost efficiency. Which brings us to section 3, the level 2 breakdown, price and efficiency. Now, what's really interesting here is that we are getting to the absolute meat of the CMA exam. We're talking variable costs, specifically direct materials and direct labor. We're going to take that flexible budget variance we just found and slice it open to pinpoint exactly where things went right or where they went horribly wrong. The first slice is the price variance, or the rate variance if we're talking about labor. This formula isolates whether we paid more or paid less than planned. You take the actual price, subtract the standard price, and multiply that difference by the actual quantity used. Notice the trick we're doing here. We are holding the quantity constant at the actual amount. That way, the only thing driving this number is the pure isolated difference in the price we paid. Our second slice is the efficiency variance, sometimes known as the usage variance. This tells us if we used more or less of the materials or labor hours than we should have used for the output we actually achieved. Here, we take the actual quantity used, subtract the standard quantity allowed, and multiply that difference by the standard price. Again, look at the structure. This time, we're holding the price constant so we can isolate the pure impact of how efficiently our team used those resources on the floor. So, the absolutely crucial point here, and think of this as Claire's insider tip for the exam, always use the standard price to calculate your efficiency variance. Why is this such a big deal? Well, think about fairness. The production manager on the factory floor controls how much material is wasted and how efficiently the workers operate, right? But they do not control a sudden spike in the market price of raw materials. That is purchasing's problem. If we used the actual price to calculate the efficiency variance, we'd be unfairly penalizing the production manager for a price hike they couldn't even control. Using the standard price keeps the whole evaluation totally fair and focused on what they actually manage. All right, zooming back out a bit, section 4, management by exception, knowing where to look. Because generating a massive variance report is basically useless if you don't know what to do with it. Imagine you're looking at a variance report. and you spot a $5 unfavorable variance on some minor supply item. Are you going to halt production and launch a full-scale investigation? No way. Good managers practice management by exception. They know their time is valuable. They literally do not have the energy to hunt down every single tiny, insignificant dollar variance. They only focus their attention on the exceptions, the numbers that truly stand out. And this brilliantly illustrates what an exception actually looks like. It isn't always just a massive dollar amount. It's heavily about the percentage and the trend over time. Check out this consistent 15% unfavorable variance trend running over 3 consecutive months. Even if the actual dollar amount isn't bankrupting the company today, a consistent unfavorable trend like this is a massive red flag. It tells you this isn't just a one-time fluke. It demands an investigation because it probably points to a permanent market shift in material costs, or maybe there's a machine on the floor that's slowly dying and chewing up extra materials. Finally, Section 5, Key Exam Takeaways, Your Strategy for Success. I want you to burn these 3 rules of thumb into your memory for test day. First, level the playing field. Never compare static budget costs to actual costs at a totally different volume. Always use a flexible budget. Second, isolate the cause. When you find a variance, immediately break it down into price, which is what we paid, and efficiency, which is what we used. And third, label correctly. A naked number is not an answer. You gotta mark your variances as favorable, meaning it generated more profit, or unfavorable, meaning it resulted in less profit than planned. So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Have you mastered the standard quantity allowed calculation yet? I ask because as your teacher, I can promise you this specific calculation inside the efficiency formula is the single most common place students trip up. It requires translating actual output backwards into allowed input. If you're hesitating on how to do that, I challenge you to make it the very first thing you practice in your next study session. You've totally got this. Your CMA journey is well underway, and I will see you in the next explainer.